Programmed to Kill. Now on A View from the Bunker. You may be aware that I've spent a good part of my adult life as a member of the dreaded mainstream media. From mid-2006 through about Thanksgiving of 2007, I served as the afternoon host and program director of an FM talk radio station in Columbia, Missouri called the Eagle 93.9. The station was and still is a fairly typical conservative-leaning talk radio station. Hosts like Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, Michael Savage, and others. And then there was me. My weekday program, which aired between 4 and 6 p.m., was called The Drive. And on Friday afternoons, at Sharon's suggestion, because she comes up with all the good ideas, it took a different tack. My opinion was that Friday afternoon listenership was in a different frame of mind. You get off work at 4 or 5 o'clock on Friday, and you're thinking differently than you are, say, at Tuesday at 4:30 in the afternoon. And so the Friday afternoon shows were called Off-Road Friday on The Drive, and we interviewed guests who normally didn't get airtime on mainstream media unless they were among the lucky few to get a shot on Coast to Coast AM. The guest that we'll present now, in fact, was recommended to us. One of our listeners at PID Radio requested an interview with this author. And so happy to dig back into my personal archive and pull out this interview from June of 2007 with author Dave McGowan about his book, Programmed to Kill. And you're hearing it now on A View from the Bunker. Our guest this afternoon is author Dave McGowan. His book is called Programmed to Kill. Dave, the title, we touched in the first segment about on mind control experiments. Am I right in assuming that that's where the title Programmed to Kill came from?
Yeah, basically it came from a quote by an attorney whose name escapes me now, but he was representing Bobby Joe Long, who happens to be a cousin of Henry Lee Lucas. That's another weird thing that I found is that you find these weird connections like Robin Gecht, who led what was known as the Ripper Crew, who carved up some women. He was a former employee of John Wayne Gacy. He worked for John Wayne Gacy. Gacy was a general contractor, basically, and he hired a lot of young, teenage kids to work for him. He was one of the ones that worked under John Gacy, and then he goes on, to lead his own serial killing cult, so there are these weird actual connections between, the serial killers themselves that are kind of weird. But anyway, I got side. What was the question that I was?
Well, just basically talking about the mind control experiments, and you mentioned that there were some of these guys, convicted serial killers, who seem to have some connection with CIA mind control experiments. And by the way, I just want to say for listeners that this MKUltra stuff is not the realm of tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. This was documented in congressional hearings back during the 70s with the Church Commission. Were they the guys who uncovered this?
Yeah, it's a lot. It is very well documented, and people scoff at it, and as soon as they hear the term, mind control or MKUltra, they just turn off.
Oh yeah, that's only in movies.
Yeah, but it is, it is very well documented, and there has been a considerable amount of information that's been obtained under Freedom of Information Act requests, and it is very well documented, and it's only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, that's just what has come out through congressional investigations and Freedom of Information Act requests is pretty much regarded as just what's known as a limited hangout, where they're just basically admitting to as little as they think they can get away with, and hoping that the story will go away. But just what has come out is rather shocking, and so it is in fact documented. I remember your question was the title of the book, real quick. An attorney for Bobby Joe Long came from a statement that he made in court, which was from the moment of birth, this man was programmed. He actually said "programmed for murder," and I changed it to "programmed to kill." That's where the title came from. But yeah, that's obviously an allusion to the MKUltra type mind control conditioning.
Is there any indication, Dave, that
some of these guys were actually programmed to kill as part of these mind control experiments?
I don't know. I think you would have a very hard time documenting anything like that.
Well, let me ask the question a different way. Is there evidence that there were mind control experiments being done in order to create Manchurian Candidate type of programmed killers? Do we know?
Absolutely, there absolutely was. That is well documented. One of the cases that's in the documentation that has come to light concerns a case where I believe it was a secretary was programmed with post-hypnotic suggestions to shoot another employee, and basically she was made to feel that her life was being threatened by this other person and that she was acting defensively when actually she was not. But that was what she had been programmed, how she had been programmed to interpret the situation. And she did, in fact, pull the trigger. The gun was not loaded, but the experiment proved that someone could, under the right laboratory conditions, a person could be programmed to do something that they would not normally be inclined to do. Even as far as killing someone, just murdering them, point blank range, shooting someone point blank range.
Dave McGowan is our guest on the Eagle 93.9. We're discussing his book, Programmed to Kill. You mentioned connections to occult, and the occult, and the fact that a lot of these murders seem to take place around what are considered to be holidays, I guess, or holy days in the occult world. What does your research lead you to in that regard? Do you find that these guys are play acting at being in the occult? I mean, in other words, are they adopting satanic symbols and rituals because that's what serial killers do, or is it really part of a belief system?
I think it's actually part of a belief system. I think it's and I think it's an integral part of this whole phenomenon, and it's part of their training, I guess, so to speak. That a lot of this traces back to satanic cult activity and early childhood abuse, basically. Often with ritualistic overtones. That's kind of why the book actually begins not with serial killers, but with the opening chapters. The first section of the book is actually about organized child exploitation, and which also has a lot of occult overtones as far as like child prostitution, child pornography, child trafficking. And all of these kind of things, which is another common element, another common theme that you find, woven through these stories, and a lot of it traces back to satanic cult sort of activity, and the whole notion of ritual abuse, which is another, hotly disputed, disputed notion.
We're hitting all the hot buttons here to just completely blow off the Eagle 93.9 listenership this afternoon, Dave. Let me ask you this.
That's the reaction that a lot of my readers have to it, because my previous books had been, they've been pretty hard-hitting, but they were, I guess they didn't step as far out of the mainstream, and people are going, what is all this mind control, satanic cult, ritual abuse,
Yeah, he's gone off the deep end, and his foil hat is on too tight. But let me ask you this, because I do want to get into that. In fact, that's how I discovered your book, was finding some information on the web under the title "The Pedophycracy," which is a very interesting word. But where did you draw your source material? Where did you go in your research to find out about all of this stuff?
Actually, the source material for, particularly for the first section, and actually for the entire book, is all very mainstream. One of my goals in doing this, and I've read, a lot of what's out there, and some of which is, is pretty far out. You get the, the victims' books like Kathy O'Brien's Transformation of America. I don't know if you're familiar with that, and Bryce Taylor's Thanks for the Memories, and some of it is just just so far out there that I think it really turns people off. And my goal, one of my goals in putting this book together, was to see whether a compelling case could be made that this stuff really is going on without having to draw upon those kind of sources. So all of the material in the first 5 chapters of I think it's 6 chapters maybe. All the organized pedophilia stuff in the beginning, which is like the first 100 pages of the book, is all drawn from very mainstream sources, mainstream newspapers, magazines, some books, some television documentaries, but all of what most people would consider to be very credible, very mainstream sources. And it took a lot of digging, to find all of that, but it is out there if you look for it, and the stories are just absolutely chilling. I mean, stories about trade in child snuff films, films of actual child murders being marketed and traded among these groups, and it's documented. I mean, I use, like I said, very mainstream sources, some court records, some U.S. Customs Service documents. It's all from mainstream media and official government documents. Everything that's in those chapters, as shocking as it may be, and as terrifying as it may be to think that kind of stuff actually happens. It's all drawn. You won't find any references to conspiraciesrus.com or whatever's out there. It's all very mainstream.
Well, that's what we wanted to find out. We're going to want to continue along those lines. We're talking with Dave McGowan, the author of Programmed to Kill. Yes, it is a dark topic, but it is one that is bubbling underneath the surface. The mainstream media reports on it for a while, and then it sort of disappears. Dave's collected up the information. It's in the book Programmed to Kill. We'll talk about organized rings of pedophiles that reach up to the highest levels of power, not just in the U.S., but around the world, when we continue. Off-Road Friday on the Drive. I'm Derek Gilbert. This is the Eagle 93.9 and the Eagle939.com. We're talking with author Dave McGowan. His book is called Programmed to Kill. It is a dark and disturbing look at things that are happening in the world around us, things you really can't close your eyes to because people are being hurt, scarred, destroyed by these actions. It's research that is pulled from mainstream media sources, not, as Dave says, from conspiraciesrus.com. And yet it's stuff that most of us, I think most people, it's fair to say, would like to pretend and do pretend that this stuff just doesn't happen here. Dave, the opening of the book, and by the way, I want to point out, if you got a question for Dave McGowan about his research and what he's discovered in the world of serial killers, organized pedophilia, lines are open at 874-9390 or 800-529-5572. Dave, the opening of the book, you deal with, for several chapters, a what appears to be almost a global network of child pornography, pedophilia, and worse.
Yeah.
What was the most shocking thing you discovered? Or let me get to, I guess, cut to the bottom line. What did you discover? What did you find? What's your analysis of the information, the evidence that you collected?
I was shocked by it myself. I mean, I was shocked that I was able to find as much as I did by combing through the mainstream media, for one thing. Yeah, I mean, the first chapter of the book is meant as kind of a sledgehammer blow, to really just sort of wake the reader up and
knock the scales off the eyes of the reader. Yeah.
And it goes through several cases that in the last 5 or 10 years have surfaced around the world. The Mark Dutroux case in Belgium, and a case in I think it was Latvia, a case in I believe like Italy. One in Mexico, I think, and all of which once the investigations began, led directly to various basically members of the global elite, so to speak, high-level politicians, police officials, military officials, media personalities, entertainers, I mean, just all of these high-level people were connected to these just appalling child exploitation rings that were involved in, child pornography, child prostitution, child trafficking, and just these horrendous crimes being committed against children by by the people that are supposed to be, the guardians of our state, so to speak, and that's a very difficult concept for people to come to terms with. That these people that they're familiar with, almost like their friends or family or something that they see on the TV every night, whether they're politicians or media personalities or whatnot, could possibly be involved in crimes that are almost beyond the imagination, really.
Well, now here in mid-Missouri, we've got a very active Internet Crimes Task Force. There's barely a week that goes by that we don't get a report of another arrest of some sleazebag who's sending naked pictures of himself to an underage girl. The Mark Dutroux case in Belgium, what kind of crimes are we talking about here? Was it just exchanging naked pictures of kids or what?
No, he had several homes in which he had custom-built basement dungeons, torture centers, soundproof dungeons where he kept young girls imprisoned and raped and beat them, repeatedly, tortured them, did anything you can imagine. And apparently filmed much of it, and he had when the case first broke, he was just sort of portrayed as just this serial killer kind of guy, just sort of a comparable to one of our serial killers who he kept these women for his own pleasure and did what he was going to do to them, and then eventually killed them and buried several of them in the yards of his homes. But there were a lot of them that were not killed and that were apparently traded off to others. And as the investigation grew, it became apparent that he was just part of a ring, that he was just one spoke in the wheel, so to speak, and that there were many other people involved in these activities, these same types of activities, torture and just unspeakable crimes being committed against children, held against their will, and some of them eventually killed, some of them eventually sold off to people for unknown purposes. And
what kind of people are we talking about here? Just average laborers, workers, office workers, or are we talking about people with some clout?
No, all the people that the trail led to were invariably high-level officials of one kind or another. Police brass, military brass, high-level politicians, and also a lot of child care workers get snared up in these when these kind of arrests or these kind of sting operations succeed. There's invariably a lot of child care workers, teachers, and youth counselors, and people that you that you're supposed to be able to entrust your child to.
What happened to Mark Dutroux?
Mark Dutroux, I don't know what his current status is. There was just an incredible amount of scandal surrounding his case. There was a lot of stonewalling. There was definitely the perception among the people that he was not being seriously prosecuted, and that that the involvement of others was being covered up and whatnot. And it actually led to a massive general strike in the country, in which several 100,000 people took to the streets.
Several 100,000?
Several 100,000, yeah, and this is in a tiny little country, with a population but a fraction of ours, and yet, I think it was, it's been a while now, 300,000, something like that, took to the streets, all dressed in white, and basically shut the country down, shut down the transportation systems, businesses, and just brought the country to a standstill and forced the ouster of a few basically sacrificial lambs from the government that the administration tossed to them, so as to, because they were basically at risk of toppling the entire government.
With just about a minute before the news here, Dave, why were the people so angry at the government over the way the Marc Dutroux case was being handled in Belgium?
Well, enough had come out in the media that people were getting a good sense of what was being covered up, and that the people were just absolutely outraged. Even government employees joined in this. The fire department, for instance, sent trucks and they turned their hoses on one of the government buildings to symbolize washing away this filth that the government had been involved in. And, it was just a huge outpouring from the public, something that you never see certainly never see in this country. We can't even put together a decent anti-war march, in this country. But, yeah, virtually the entire country turned out and just shut down the country and demanded that something be done.
That's a little surprising, because the perception I have is that Europe is a little more progressive in its attitudes about sex in general than we are here in the United States. Europeans consider us to be pretty, Victorian in our approach to sex. And yet the country of Belgium was so outraged by the fact that Dutroux wasn't being prosecuted enough, or that people were being protected, that they basically shut the country down.
Yeah. I think a lot of it was the perception that Dutroux was sort of being presented as a fall guy, and in fact he made statements to the press to that effect, that he was just a fall guy, and that there was much more to the story, and enough had come out through the media. There was quite a bit that was suppressed, but enough had come out that the people were just absolutely outraged, that this was going on.
We're talking to author Dave McGowan. His book is called Programmed to Kill: Rings of Organized Pedophiles, Serial Killers with Occult Backgrounds, perhaps serving as fall guys, patsies for groups of occult groups here in the United States, and all documented through mainstream media sources. Conversation will continue as All Forward Friday rolls on here on The Drive. I'm Derek Gilbert. This is the Eagle 93.9 and the Eagle939.com. Monday through Thursday, we talk about the typical topics: politics, life, jobs, the economy. Friday afternoons, we do something different. Off-Road Friday, we take the show down paths less traveled. Our guest this afternoon is Dave McGowan. His website is davesweb.com. davesweb.com. The book we're discussing is his latest, Programmed to Kill. The Marc Dutroux case, organized group of pedophiles apparently getting some protection from somebody in power in Belgium and elsewhere around Europe. Dave, a couple of questions. First of all, you mentioned occult connections to the serial killers that you profile in your book. You see any of that with the Dutroux case? And then question number two, were there any connections between Dutroux and the European pedophile ring and groups of pedophiles inside the United States?
The occult, I don't remember specifically if there was overt occult symbolism in the Dutroux case or not. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and double check that. But as far, there were definitely connections to other rings within Europe, and there was at least one connection to here in the U.S. There was a very brief report that I think popped up in the L.A. Times on a pedophile case in Florida that was connected to the Dutroux case, and then that whole story just sort of got dropped. And in fact, when I went back later to try to retrieve that little, it was just one of these little, 2-paragraph little in brief articles that they kind of tuck into, fill in space.
Fill a couple of column inches, yeah.
Yeah, it was a little thing, and I went back to try to retrieve it, and it had disappeared from the archives, actually. But so there was definitely some kind of a connection there to a case in Florida. Florida and Texas and California are the three probably most popular states for that kind of thing. But
now you mentioned Florida, and that leads to another one, another area of the book that you get into, a case that starts in Florida, Tallahassee. And this is really disturbing, and it ties in a couple of things. You mentioned the abuse of children as an aspect of what appears to be organized occult behavior. But in Tallahassee, Florida, you document a case from major media sources, U.S. News and World Report, Washington Times, about a group called the Finders.
Yeah, the Finders case.
Talk about the Finders.
The Finders were a group operating out of Washington, D.C. area. They were stopped and arrested in Florida for transporting these children that seemed to the arresting officers to be almost like sort of feral children. I mean, they didn't seem to know how to use any kind of modern devices. They were.
How old were these kids?
I don't remember. They were fairly young. I mean, they were like preteen, definitely. And they were described as just filthy, dirty, just filthy clothes, unfed, unwashed, sort of not really aware of their surroundings, not aware of any kind of, they didn't know how to use a telephone, or they're just these very odd children. And they were arrested on suspicion of I don't remember exactly what they were suspected of, but the officers obviously just found the situation a little odd. And then they investigated, and the trail led to a couple of the group's properties in the D.C. area that were searched by the U.S. Customs officials. And they turned up just an array of evidence that this group was involved in, was very much actively involved in child exploitation and child trafficking. They had numerous, voluminous computer files on tracking of children and transporting children, and they had like a film studio set up. They actually found photographic evidence that the children had been exposed to and forced to participate in animal sacrifices, the slaughter of a couple of goats. It was documented. I mean, they had photographic evidence of it. Just an array of evidence that this group was directly involved in all these types of nefarious activities with children around the world. They had networks around the world that they were connected to.
So how did they document this network? I mean, did they have faxes or phone records, or how did they document that these guys were connected with people around the world?
They seized all their computer records, all their computer files, and I presume their phone records, and I mean everything that they found in their headquarters there. I mean they had quite a paper trail, and it was the the customs officer who led the investigation wrote up a report where he specifically noted that they had found all of this stuff. And various files related to other covert operations as well, sort of a black operation in various parts of the world, and the whole thing was basically covered up. The case was declared to be a CIA internal matter, and they just sort of brushed the whole thing under the rug.
A CIA internal matter.
Yeah, because this group was acknowledged to be a subcontractor for the CIA. They were doing subcontract work for the CIA. What they actually were was a front group for them. I mean, that wasn't obviously admitted to, but they did acknowledge that the group had done subcontract work for the CIA.
So. The status of the investigation then? It just didn't go anywhere, or were the investigating authorities basically told shut it down because this is something the CIA will take care of inside?
Yeah, basically that's what the customs official, when he tried to follow up on it, was basically told that it was no longer it was no longer of his concern. It was a internal matter that was going to be handled by the agency, and of course. Nothing was ever handled. The whole thing was just swept under the rug, and the media moved on and didn't talk about it, and it just, sort of went away. But there is, that original Customs Service memo written by the guy, by the officers who actually conducted the investigation and booked all of this evidence. is still out there, and it's very specific, very explicit about what they found, and there were obviously serious crimes being committed by this group, and yet the whole thing was swept under the rug, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, it appeared to me from the book, Program to Kill, Dave, that basically what was found by law enforcement in Washington, D.C. were what amounted to purchase orders from people on other parts of the world. Send me a child of such and such age and such description, and that's what the finders did. And yet this was declared to be a CIA internal matter and then closed. The matter closed.
That's apparently what the name finders referred to. They specialized in finding specific children to fill specific orders. Somebody wants a blonde, blue-eyed girl, or what? I don't know. I don't know how it works. I assume something along those lines, and that's what they did. They traded in children. They trafficked in children, and it was very well documented. I mean, just from what the officer was able to observe just in going through some of this stuff, and that was only the tip of the iceberg, obviously, because they weren't going through all this stuff page by page as they were taking it into evidence. But just what he observed, during the time that they were there and wrote into his report is pretty compelling evidence that these people were definitely involved in some very very serious crimes being committed against children around the world, apparently.
And no one prosecuted, as far as we know. Author Dave McGowan is our guest on Off-Road Friday this afternoon. We're talking about his book, Program to Kill. It leads to some very dark questions and some very disturbing questions, but it's documented that these things happen, and part of the world around us, I think if you want to understand the world, you can't close your eyes to anything. Valuable reading. We'll continue one final segment with Dave McGowan straight ahead. I'm Derek Gilbert. This is the Eagle 93.9 and the Eagle939.com. Kind of a dark hour and a half program today as we talk with author Dave McGowan about his book, Programmed to Kill. I wouldn't have brought you on, Dave, if you hadn't documented this and if the sources weren't available to cross-check, because a lot of the articles that you cite in your book are still available online through various news agencies in their archives. And I'm not interested in doing programs that are sensational just for the sake of being sensational. This is not the Jerry Springer Show. This is not Maury or Ricky Lake. But there are things that happen in this world that we wish didn't happen. And your book certainly catalogs an awful lot of them in the very recent past. And what's shocking, almost as shocking as the things that are in your book, Dave, is the fact that most of us just don't know that this stuff is going on. When you did this research for Program to Kill, how did it affect your perception of the world around us?
It had a significant effect on me, actually. It was kind of a difficult psychological transition to kind of make, to come to grips with the fact that this stuff really is going on out there. I mean, I'd been digging progressively deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole for many years, and my view of the world had changed considerably even before that, but that really, I mean, I spent like 4 years actually working on that book, put a considerable amount of time into it, and so basically I was wallowing in that material for a period of several years, and it required a major adjustment. I mean, I went through some troubling times, trying to sort of psychologically come to terms with it. It's almost like waking up one day and realizing that up is down and black is white, and your whole world is just sort of
like being the
sort of turned upside down. It's difficult for people to grasp just how dark things really are out there.
It's like being the lead character in that Rowdy Roddy Piper movie, They Live. You put on the glasses and you realize there are monsters all around you, and you're the only one who sees them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that makes it even harder because you kind of feel like you're all alone out, and veering into some very very strange waters, without a co-captain or something, It's
not the kind of stuff you can bring up at polite dinner parties.
No, it doesn't really go over well at Thanksgiving dinner, So yeah, it takes quite an adjustment really in your whole sort of outlook on life and and on the world that we live in and just how sick and twisted it really is.
What conclusions did you draw about the world after you completed the research for Program to Kill? I mean, are there secret societies out there? Are there what did you learn in the course of researching this book that you didn't know before you started writing it?
I would say that's a good question. I don't know that I have a real good answer for that. I don't know beyond just the world's even that no matter how how jaundiced your view of the world may be and how savvy you may think you are to what's really going on in the world, the truth may be even more than you're ready to ready to come to terms with.
In the book Program to Kill, Dave, you document several cases, well-known serial killers who, contrary to the way that they're portrayed in the media, appear to be frontmen or contract killers. They appeared to be carrying out hits for organized groups that seem to have at least occult overtones to them, if not being flat-out occultists. You also document groups of organized pedophiles who appear to protect and cover for one another, so that when they do come to light, when somebody is caught, that there never seems to be as much justice handed out as the rest of us would hope. Is that a fair assessment, a fair analysis, a summary of the book Program to Kill?
Yeah, I would say so. And as we were talking about earlier, when these organized child exploitation rings have come to light in Europe and to some extent here, in the Craig Spence case, the Franklin case, the Finders case, the trail invariably leads to very high levels, to judges and media, like we were talking about before. So you gotta realize that if those are if these cults reach does extend to that level, then that's obviously going to make it considerably easier to cover these things up when they do surface. If they control elements within the police, within the courts, within the media, all the people that should be dealing with exposing and prosecuting these people, if they have their own people in positions of power within those organizations, then they're protected.
Dave McGowan is our guest on the Eagle 93.9, coming down to our final few minutes as we talk about his book, Program to Kill. And when you start talking that way again, Dave, again, you got to be... How do I phrase this? You run the risk of sounding like a loon. How does this... And I'm not saying that to be unkind, because I know exactly where you're coming from. When I talk about this with friends, very often they'll kind of arch an eyebrow and kind of back away. How does this affect your personal life, your professional life, when you write a book like this and say, you know what, this stuff is real?
It doesn't really too much. I keep I keep that aspect separate pretty much from my family life and my real world work life. I don't bring that up a lot at work, I don't think it would go over too well. So I definitely keep boundaries there between between me and my alter ego, so to speak. Because it's not the kind of material that really goes over well in a lot of social situations.
No, I can relate.
But I mean, I just, my goal was to follow the trail wherever it led, and when I first set out on this journey, so to speak, I didn't really know where. I had no idea that it was going to end up, branching off into all these sort of bizarre areas. But I just follow the trail wherever it leads, and if there's documentation for it, then that's what I'm going to report. And what I found was that these things could be documented, and they can be documented without having to go to sources that will immediately turn a lot of people off and cause them to disregard the entire body of evidence,
right.
Because
to discount Program to Kill, you need to start discounting sources like the Washington Post, the LA Times, the New York Times, court records, the U.S. News and World Report, overseas, the BBC, and all sorts of other mainstream publications that have reported on these cases. It's out there if you look for it. Most of us choose not to do so. Dave, again, your website?
www.davesweb.com.
The book is Programmed to Kill. You'll find it online at Amazon.com and any other online bookseller. Dave, the time has gone by very quickly, and we barely scratched the surface. I appreciate your time this afternoon, and look forward to talking with you again.
I look forward to it as well. Thank you very much for having me on.
Dave McGowan, author of the book Programmed to Kill. I'm Derek Gilbert. Monday we get back to regular business. We'll talk politics again, and meanwhile, try to sleep well this weekend.
Indeed. I'll post a link to Dave's website where you can find the book Programmed to Kill in hard copy and ebook format, and also a link to a collection of the first section of the book Programmed to Kill, which is published online under the title The Pedopocracy. This goes into the section of the book we discussed during the interview regarding the organized rings of pedophiles operating around the world, seemingly with legal impunity. And again, all of it documented through major news sources, not internet chatter, not unfounded accusation, not speculation, but major news accounts of the arrests and the cases as they progressed through the courts, as far as they progressed, that is. Again, all of that in the show notes at PIDradio.com. The email address, if you'd like to send comments, questions, or suggestions to me, is radio@peeringintodarkness.com. You'll find a link in the show notes there at PIDradio.com, as well as links to all of the other places you can find us on the web. Twitter, Facebook, Shelfari for the PID Radio Book Club, and all sorts of places. Again, all of that in the show notes at PIDradio.com. Thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.